Okay, it is time to get started with our free Q&A this week. Today is March 9th, 2023. I'm super excited because my book is almost done. I've been getting blurbs back. I learned that that is a word, that there is a thing called blurbs. So that's pretty exciting. So we're getting the blurbs back for the back of my book. I have two of those to share with you tonight. I'm not going to reshare the ones we shared last week, because we already did that. But tonight we're going to be talking about some other things, because people are always asking me, they've asked me for 20 years, what do you do in your garden at this time of year? Well, it depends where you are. I have a friend who lives in lower Alabama, like southern Alabama, and he's picking all kinds of food right now. It looks like my garden in the middle of the summer, and his pumpkins are ready to pick in early July is when they pick pumpkins, which is totally different than where I garden. And we still have feet of snow. We got another snowstorm yesterday. It didn't amount to much, but we did get snow. And so that's pretty exciting. So in places we have 6-foot snow drifts, which is pretty exciting. Most places they're not that big, but we do have some giant snow drifts around. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit here tonight. And so depending on whether or not you have frozen ground or if your ground has thawed out, this is what I do in March. So in my greenhouse, the ground is thawed out. So these are the things I'm doing on the right-hand side. But outside where the ground is frozen, then those are the things I'm doing. So let's start with the left side where the ground is frozen. So if my ground is frozen, I obviously can't do a lot of gardening in your frozen ground, and my garden has about 2 feet of snow on it. So what am I doing? I still am doing a lot of gardening right now in the beginning of March. And these things would be appropriate all the way until the beginning of April. So the next 3 or 4 weeks is a good time to do these things if you have frozen ground. So I'm starting all my seeds indoors, but what seeds are those? Mainly tomatoes, onions, peppers, and the cabbage family. Those are the main things I'm starting right now. Of course, every month of the year, 12 months of the year, I start other things that I grow in my greenhouse. So don't confuse what I'm doing on the frozen ground portion with that other set of gardening that I do. So the tomatoes, onions, peppers, cabbage family, those are things that I will grow to be transplanted outside after the ground is ready to, once you can work the ground a little, dig a hole, and it's not going to kill your tomato plants. So we're starting those inside, and I've just got my tomatoes planted this last week. So they are in plug trays, but they are not coming up yet, so because it's only been a couple of days. And then making compost. The winter time is a great time to make compost, and I have composts going right now. And if I didn't have my buildings where I put compost, I would make them outside, and I have made them outside in the snow. It works just fine. You just have to have a big enough pile that it can maintain the heat during the cold weather. And then feeding livestock on the garden beds that are not growing a winter cover crop. That is a great thing to do in the super early spring and late winter of this time of year. So anytime, February, March, April, those are good times to have your livestock on the garden. Now, if you are growing a winter cover crop that you want to get big in the spring, you could damage it with livestock. So you need to be thoughtful. You need to be mindful of what is happening with your livestock so you're not messing something up. But if you have a garden bed that you harvested a bunch of stuff out in the fall and you don't have a cover crop that's going to come up and you're depending on that to grow in the springtime, it's a fantastic time to have a disturbance on that land with the livestock. Now, if you do feed livestock, you need to think about what you're feeding them and if that's going to cause you a weed problem. A lot of times hay will be full of all kinds of weeds. And the worst weeds for a garden is grass. So if you're feeding a grass hay or even an alfalfa hay that has grass seed in it, be very careful that you're not planting a massive amount of weed seeds that will be coming up and causing you a problem. But if you can get your livestock out there, they will be urinating on that ground, which is absolutely wonderful. They will be defecating on the ground. That's wonderful because that is nitrogen source, and that is bacteria and fungal food. That's exactly what you want for your soils. And just to be clear, most of what is in the urine is the nitrogen source, and most of what is in the defecation or the poop from the animals is going to be food for the microbes. It helps to create that detritosphere on the soil surface, which is fantastic. And then chickens, any kind of birds that you have are great to get across your fields. The wintertime is a good time to do that unless you have a lot of snow, and then it can just be hard to do. Chickens will be fine out there if you have a good pen for them and you can move them along, and they have a place where they can get off the snow. And there are chicken coops designed like that. Here again, if you're feeding birds whole grains, some of those probably won't get eaten by the chicken, and then it could grow into a weed problem. So be cautious of feeding the livestock on your garden. If you are feeding chickens, you may want to grind all the seeds first. If you're just buying a chicken feed, some chicken feeds like the scratch grains or whole grains, and they will grow. So you just need to be aware of that so that you can plan for what you're doing. Okay, let's move to the right column over here. If your ground has thawed out, for me, that's in my greenhouse. Or if you live, there's places in Arizona, there's southern areas, maybe, and a lot of times in where I grew up in Hurricane, Utah, down south, that's on the border of the Mojave Desert. And we would start planting when I was a kid. I was there for 18 years. And every year we would grow peas early, and we would plant them in February because the ground was workable and the coldest part of winter was already gone. So, there's a lot of places where you just think it through in your mind. Do you have thawed out ground, whether it's in a greenhouse or outside? Doesn't matter. What matters is it still frozen or is it thawed out? And if it's thawed out, it's time to plant your early potato crop. It's time to put a tarp down to kill out noxious weeds. If you have an area that you like grass or bindweed, quackgrass, anything that you don't want growing, now is a good time to get your tarps on there and leave your tarp for 2 or 3 months so that it completely kills out those weeds. And then you can take that off and you have a clean garden bed to start with. And then planting your seeds outside. Onion seeds can be direct seeded outside. Carrot seeds, beets, peas, favas, radishes, turnips, cereals, and brassicas can all be planted pretty early. You probably need to know a little bit more about that because, like, if you still have really hard frosts coming in your particular let's just call it a microclimate where you live, then you may grow some brassicas. Like let's say there are certain varieties of cabbages and broccoli, and if they get 2 or 3 inches tall, they're doing really good, and then you get a hard frost, it will kill them back. But if the brassica is something like a forage collard or turnips or kale, those are a lot more winter hardy, and so you could go ahead and get those planted now. So some of the brassicas are more winter hardy than others, more frost hardy, and so some need to be planted a month or so later. And of course, start seeds indoors because it's early. If you're going to have frosts that are later on, then you need to start those seeds indoors that you're going to be putting out after your last frost date. Most people in North America think that May 1st is gardening season. and that's the day you plant your garden and put your garden in. It's not, but that's what all the gardening books kind of say. So we'll just go with it for right now, just for fun. But what would you start indoors to go out after your first frost date? And that list is over here once you're on the left-hand side: tomatoes, onions, peppers, cabbage. So if you're going to be transplanting things, go ahead and start them indoors now. And then those things would go out after most of them go out after your hard frost date is over. Tomatoes and peppers have to go out after all frost danger is over. The cabbage family, which is the same as the brassica family, by the way. I called those two things different things in these two lists, but same thing. Brassica's, cabbage, same family. But when you put those out, some can go out earlier, like I already said, some go out later. So the ones that go out later, like cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower, you would want to start those seeds indoors this early in the year for most places. Like, even in Hurricane, where I grew up, where we can have super warm winters there, now is the time to start the cabbages. I would not start those outside, direct seed them. But if I was an hour and a half drive south, like in the Moapa Valley of Nevada, just on just past St. George, you just go through the gorge down there, down in that Moapa Valley area. I think they're not going to have any frosts from here on out. I don't think. Usually not. I'm not from there, so I don't know, but I would guess that most of these things could be planted. Make compost. So whether your ground is frozen or thawed out, it doesn't matter. This is still a great time of year to make compost. The reason this is a good time to make compost is you're not doing a lot of other gardening work a lot of times. If you are making compost in August, that's the worst time, because that's your busiest time for all the planting and harvesting and all the other stuff you're doing, because that's when you're planting your fall harvest, but you're harvesting what you planted in the springtime. So you have a major amount of work. So I don't like to be doing the hard work of making compost at that time of year, because it's too much workload all at once. One thing that's fantastic to do in the early spring, as soon as your ground thaws, is to spread compost and to spread your compost extract. Now is the time to do that. Inoculate your garden with the earthworms and make that stuff happen. It's fantastic. Here's some pictures of my greenhouse at this time of year. The picture on the left where you can see the greenhouse roof, this is a greenhouse I had when I lived in Paradox, Colorado. And you can see that those are big long rows of carrots right there. Half of this greenhouse was carrots. So I had 15 feet wide and then 100 feet long rows of carrots. You can see I had a little bit of grass in there that was growing. We still had beautiful crops of carrots, even though there was some grass in there. But it was this time of year. It was early March when I took that picture. The other two pictures are in the greenhouse I have now, the Wallapini style solar greenhouse. And these pictures were taken last year in March. Actually, that's not true. I just told a lie. But that's fine. But my lettuce on the bottom there, that was actually in the summer. But I was looking out there today and thought, man, I wish I had my camera, and I didn't. But when I came in and looked at the computer, this picture looks exactly like the picture that is in my excuse me, this picture looks just like the lettuce that's in the greenhouse right now. So I just picked 2 bags of lettuce today, and it was pretty fun because I was just able to just grab the tops of the lettuce with one hand, and then I take a razor sharp knife and just gently cut halfway up through the leaves, and that leaves half of the leaves there so that you get fast growth to come back. And at this time of year, I can get 5 cuts of lettuce off of one lettuce plant. And I'm cutting them about every 2 weeks at this time of year with the light levels, and they're doing really good. And then the top picture is a picture of Claytonia. What you're actually seeing there, it's a big giant pot that's about 2.5 feet across, but you can't really see the pot. And then that's a fig tree that's growing out of the pot. And then the little round shaped leaves, that's called Claytonia. There's another name for it, which is miner's lettuce, same plant. And then you can see the garlic growing in there because I put garlic bulbs in there because I love to have a diversity of plants growing together. It makes harvesting a little bit harder, but it makes it so that you don't really have disease and pest problems if you can get 4 plant families growing together. And here I have 3 plant families. So I'm almost to 4. But anyway, I'm trying, even though that picture didn't work out perfect in that pot. But the miner's lettuce is delightful. It's very, very beautiful plant to eat. Those leaves are really good, and it's very frost hardy. It's a great plant to grow in the winter time. It's as frost hardy as spinach and kale. Those are probably the 3 most frost hardy plants there are. So it can freeze solid, and then when it, like at nighttime, and then during the day, it will, when it thaws out in the greenhouse, because the greenhouse gets warm during the day. Once it thaws out, then you can pick it and take it in, put it in your lettuce salad. So that looks good. But other things that I'm harvesting right now in the greenhouse is what these other words are. So I have an array of all kinds of lettuce, spinach, Chinese cabbage, green onions, beets, chard, alfalfa, kale, cabbage, and wheatgrass. Now, there's 2 things on here that are not as common, which is wheatgrass and alfalfa. They're both very easy to grow, and they're both very highly nutritious for, just nutrition. Alfalfa, it's like the perfect food. We feed it to livestock all the time. Pretty much that's all you feed livestock sometimes, and they can thrive on it. They do very well. I think if you have a more diverse diet for the livestock, they actually do a little bit better. But you can have very healthy livestock that are just eating alfalfa. Now, alfalfa is not palatable. I wonder if I spelled that right. Did I spell alfalfa wrong? It looks weird. But alfalfa has every vitamin that humans know about. We haven't figured out any other vitamins that it doesn't have. And by the way, we are learning about new vitamins. There's like new research in the last 20 years of people starting to see that vitamins are not always the same, which is fascinating. I know nothing about that. I'm not a nutritionist, but there is work being done on that, which is pretty fantastic. The way that we assimilate vitamins is different. Sometimes we can assimilate them in different ways. And sometimes it's us, and sometimes it's the way the vitamin is. Sometimes it looks like it's there, but then it's not really available. And then there's vitamin K2, which is, in the last 20-25 years, it was just figured out. And so science is so fascinating right now, the things we're learning. But alfalfa, you wouldn't just grab a bale of hay and try to eat alfalfa. Humans aren't going to eat that. But when alfalfa is very tender and small, you can clip off. And if you have less than 10% of that in your salad and eat that, it's extremely nutritious. Our bodies thrive with it, and it's not unpalatable in a mixed greens salad. And it's one of those foods, if I'm not a doomsdayer, I don't think the world's coming to an end. I think the world is going to have some serious challenges in the future, the near future, just because of what's happening with globalization and the lack of like our workforce, the way we've known it in the last 50 years, and what it's going to look like in the next 10 to 15. So there's challenges that are coming. But if you are a doomsdayer and you are a prepper, you better be growing alfalfa if you think the grocery stores will not have food and we can't buy vitamins anymore, because alfalfa is one of the easiest plants in the world to grow, and you just eat it raw when the new shoots are growing. And anyway, I've beat that dead horse enough. Let's move to the next slide. Okay, so usually I do this at the first, but I just wanted to mix it up. These are the 9 ways I help you grow food. I go through this every single week when I do my free class, and just to make sure that people see this. I have my YouTube channel. I have my weekly Q&A, which is what we're doing right now. And I have my Patreon class. You can pay $8 a month and you have access to my library. I'm a laboratory to do soil testing, so I can help you with your soils. I have a 17-week boot camp farmer career training, and that is coming up. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. My 3-day boot camp is coming up too, and this is a fun deal. So sign up. I have people signing up for this. I still have room for some more people. So don't think that we are full on those classes, because we're not. And then I am available for consulting. If you need to put together a farm, you can hire me for that. And I have a newsletter. So if you enter your email into my website, which is on the left, bottom left, www.georgiarevolution.com, then you will get my newsletter. I don't send my newsletter out like all the time, because I don't like to bug people. My inbox is full of stuff so much that I think I have 18,000 unopened emails in my inbox, because I don't know how to manage it. And there's just all this junk in there. And so I don't send stuff out to just because that's what people do. I send something out when I have something that people want to know. So that's the newsletter. Number 8, I skipped it on purpose, just like last week. My book is getting reviewed by people, and I have a couple of new blurbs to share this week. And here's the first one from Richard Louv. I contacted him. He is a fan of mine because he has such great books. So I read one of his books years ago, and he talked about nature deficit disorder, which was pretty great. But his two super popular, most current books are The Nature Principle and Vitamin N. And he sent me this blurb. So this blurb's going in my book when we get it published, which it's in the publishing process. It's almost done. But he says, William DeMille digs deeper into the soil to find the real problems and solutions. So thank you, Richard Louv. And I thought it was fun. I did dig kind of deep into this book. I always believe in going wide with your education, which is getting lots of information, and then you go super deep in your education, which means you research all that information one piece at a time, so that you understand the origins and the whys and the hows and the whos and the whats and the wheres and the whens. And once you do that, then you know what you're talking about. At least you can form an educated opinion. Even if you're wrong, at least you can be educated, and you're not just spewing dogmatic stuff that you've heard from the radio. And then Oliver DeMille, I've told you a little bit last week about some of the things he was saying, because we were conversing about it. But here's his blurb. And I thought this one was a fun perspective, because my book does go into environmentalism a little bit. He says, environmentalism got it wrong. Wrong about organic food and GMOs. Wrong about the impact of cattle on the atmosphere. Wrong about what makes the best soil for raising food. Wrong about desertification and environmental changes. Wrong about the causes of hunger around the world. And wrong about the solutions. And it's wrong about so much more. Anyone who cares about the future of the environment, freedom, ranching, farming, or food production needs to read this book. You'll see the world in a totally different way. It's an instant classic. So I was really happy with this blurb. It was very complimentary. I was excited about it because I didn't know it, but I think that's actually what I tried to do. Because I hate to say this out loud, because people will cut and paste what I say and take it completely out of context. But here goes vulnerability. I've always been an environmentalist, but not an environmentalist who's militant, not one who attacks people, not one who does the mean things to others. I just love the interactions of how the environment interacts with the way people do things, because we can do something and, you know, it changes the environment. So when I have heard in the past of environmentalists talking about stuff, it made sense to me. And then people who I thought would totally agree with what I thought, they were saying how stupid these environmentalists were. And it was hard to navigate that, because as a farmer, when I go out and plow a field, I can completely change my environment. And so I know that humans have a big impact on the environment. And then when I talk to my friends about that, they said, well, that's not what we mean. We're like, well, then what do you mean? And very seldom can people really articulate what they did mean. They just didn't like the politics of it. Well, I hate the politics of it too. That's not, but I was never talking about the politics. Anybody who has opened their eyes knows that the political solutions don't work 90% of the time. In other words, 90% of the time, they're wrong. And it doesn't work very well. At least it hasn't in my lifetime. No, there are times when politics works great, but not in the last 60 years. Not since World War II. Let's open this up for Q's and A's. If you're interested in coming to boot camp, here is the information, and go to my website on the bottom of this page to get the details. And all my contact info is on the website. And the 17-week course is going to be brilliant this year. Don't miss it. I'm taking 5 students this year. I have 2 signed up, and I have 3 people thinking about it. So whoever gives me their deposit first gets in. So don't wait around. Okay, I'm done selling my classes to you. Let's open this up for questions. And I'm going to stop my screen share here. So questions, you can type in the chat your question, or you can unmute, and we can just talk and have a conversation like normal people.
We've got a compost question, or Holly does.
So, since we're not at our property yet, I have in the backyard a bunch of food scraps I've been collecting. I've heard you talk about compost tangentially, about how to make your compost, and I know there's various percentages of colors, but I haven't caught exactly what those are. So my plan right now is to try to dig out from the bottom of that compost pile and take it with us in a couple 5-gallon buckets, and then use that to make an extract. I don't know that I can do better than that at this moment, but what comments do you have about that?
Okay, so you really never want to add a compost that has any kind of a disease, like any disease causing organism, whether it will hurt an animal, a human, or a plant. And so it's going to be super simple for you to know if that's going to happen. So you're going to dig out the bottom of that compost where it's turned nice and dark and beautiful colored, and you're going to smell it. What I mean by that is you're going to get a handful of it, and you're going to bring it right up in your face, make sure nobody's taking pictures, and you're going to take a big whiff of that, and it looks like this. And you inhale that, okay? And if it smells disgusting, if it smells bad, if it smells like it's rotten, if it smells like sewer or rotten eggs or a chemical or anything that is foul, then it has disease-causing organisms in it. And so you have 2 choices. Choice number 1 is keep composting it until the anaerobic turns aerobic, and then it has a sweet smell, and then you can use it. So yeah, you could take it with you. If it still smells bad, just continue to compost it once you get where you're going. But let me reiterate that real quick. The way to know if it's good compost is if it smells sweet and good. If it has absolutely no odor at all, fantastic. If it smells like a really wonderful forest floor with an earthy, rich, nice smell, and you would almost want that as a perfume in your house to smell good, then fantastic. Those are good smells. But anything sharp or pungent or sewer smelling, bad. Okay, so that's the way to know.
Great. Thank you.
You bet. Okay, nobody be shy. It looks like we have something in the chat. Let me open that up here. John saying
William?
I have a Melanie. Yes.
Yeah. Well, you can read that question and then you can ask me if you want.
Thank you. Okay. John says, I have overgrown fruit trees in Missouri. Should I cut them back or cut them down? How much should I cut them back if I do that? John, why are you going to cut your fruit trees down? Why is that even an option? Are they not producing fruit? So I don't understand that part, but
Well, they're producing, well, some of them are producing. No, not very good, not very productive fruit.
We're not here when they're.
okay, John, here's what you're going to do. Anytime you have an old overgrown fruit tree, cut out the dead wood first. Okay. If you don't know what's dead because it's in the dormant season and the leaves are off of everything, then you grab a twig and you bend it. When it gets to 90 degrees, if it has snapped, it's dead. If the bark is falling off of it, it's dead on bigger branches because you can't bend over a big old giant branch to see. But you can start to tell the difference between the dead just by looking at the wood. Once you snap 5 or 6 dead ones and you are bending 5 or 6 that are alive, you will see the difference. And so first thing, go in and cut out all the dead wood everywhere, all the big branches that are dead, all the little branches that are dead, and then stand back and look at your tree and then see how much more wood is in it. Because sometimes half your tree will be dead wood. And once you cut all that out, it'll be, you don't have too much more work to do. I've seen that scenario before. And then you just want to go in and cut out a little bit, like not much though, that first year. You want to cut out maybe 10%. If you go in and do a really heavy pruning on an old tree, it can shock them and kill them. So if you want it to live, cut out maybe 10%. So take a good look at your tree and pick 5 or 6 branches on a tree that has, 50 or 60 branches. Pick out 5 or 6 branches that you think should come out. Things that are way high in the air going straight up, branches that are crisscrossing, branches that are causing shade to the rest of the tree. And then you would cut those off and then leave it alone. And then the next year you could cut out maybe 15 to 20%. And then the next year you could cut out a little bit more until you get it to the basic shape and size that you want. But if you prune it completely back to the shape and size you want on those old overgrown trees, you can shock them and kill them. But if you're about to cut the whole thing down anyway, then I guess you could give it a serious pruning. And then if it died, you haven't lost much.
Any of them. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
good advice.
The cherry tree is not as old as some of the others. Do we want to top it off a bit? Because it is tall. It's taller than we want. It was a semi-dwarf. Everything here grows bigger than they say it's gonna. So it's really almost a full-size tree. So what do we do with the cherry tree? Do we just do like you say, or do we want to cut back some of it so it's not quite so tall? Or
yeah, if you're wanting to shorten it, just look at your overall height, figure out where 10% is, and get your saw out and go to work. Just keep your 10% rule for any species of fruit tree.
Okay. I had a question about compost. We have the opposite in each area here now. In Missouri, our compost is dry. It had too much added to it, just a bunch of twigs and leaves and stuff in the fall. And in Utah, it's mostly wet. Too bad we couldn't combine them. But what would you suggest? What would you suggest for both areas right now for the compost piles that we have?
Drive to Missouri super fast, fill up the trunk of your car with all those sticks and bring them to Utah. Just kidding. Don't do that. I couldn't resist.
Tempted.
Okay, so in Missouri, it's mostly sticks and it's dry. So add a bunch of green plants, add some old hay, and get it wet.
Okay.
In Utah, it's the opposite. You have a bunch of wet stuff, so you need to add a bunch of dry stuff. I mean, it's really as simple as that, you know.
You know what you're gonna do then?
Well, yeah, you're saying hay
Yeah, hey.
and
Hay.
water, or green plants.
Do you guys have a neighbor with some livestock and a barnyard full of manure and old rotten hay and all that stuff?
No, but I did meet somebody, but I didn't get their phone number. They just kind of told me where they lived. They
You
have,
gotta make friends.
we do. They're a ways away from us though.
We live in the middle of the city, unlike where you lived out in the country.
I know. The city is a curse, isn't it?
It is.
Okay. Well, all right. Okay. Who else has questions tonight?
I have one. I watched a video about a guy talking about composting, and he really went on and on about how bad it was to compost animal products. And so I was curious what your thoughts were about composting animal products, meat, cheeses, etc.
Okay. This is a complicated answer. I'm gonna make it super simple. What he was teaching is mythology. Nature composts animal products all the time. And the whole point of having the best soil health is to mimic nature. So why do people say not to compost animal products? Because the books on composting say not to do animal products. Why do the books say that? Because the books were written by people who live in cities and they have neighbors. And if you compost animal products, they stink and your neighbors hate you. And when you compost animal products, the stinkiness of the rotting meat and all that stuff, because it's high protein, so it has a foul odor, it attracts rodents like rats, mice. I don't know what it attracts. It attracts all kinds of vermin. If you live in a place where there's possums and raccoons, it will attract them. It will attract birds. It will attract all kinds of creatures that can cause a problem in the setting of a city. People want their city to be a certain way. That's why they have CC&Rs. It's why they have codes. It's why they have laws that are only for the city. And each city has their own unique set of laws. That's why the books said that originally. And I can agree with it on a social level, so we can get along with people. But from a nutrition level, we're talking about nutrition of the soil. It makes a fantastic high nitrogen. All animal products make a great high nitrogen for your microbes in the compost, to heat that compost up and to get it going really good. When you butcher your animals, save the blood and put it in your compost. It's a high nitrogen. It's fantastic. Okay, we have some other people on here tonight. If you guys have questions, feel free to type in the chat and ask your question, and you can unmute and we can just have a conversation.
So I have a question then about you know, you were saying animal products. So my leftover meat that I've cooked and or grease and other kinds of stuff like that. What about putting that in your compost?
Yeah, that's a good idea. See, you're a two-person family, so you probably don't have that many that many kitchen scraps. So it can be tricky because you don't want to be adding a little bit at a time to your compost. People have compost bins, and then every day they take their kitchen scraps out and they stick in there. That's not a very good way to grow the microbes for which compost is created. I mean, the whole reason for a compost is to grow the proper microbes. So when we're saving our compost, as far as kitchen scraps, if you can have a 5-gallon bucket that you keep in a deep freeze, put them in there so they freeze every day. That's a fantastic way to do that if you have the room. I wouldn't recommend you go out and buy a deep freeze just so that you can freeze your compostable materials. That doesn't seem like a smart idea. But if you have room to keep a 5-gallon bucket with a lid on it, you could put those scraps in there. They'll be frozen in 8 hours or whatever. And so they're not going to contaminate your other food because they're frozen. And then when your bucket gets full, then you have a 5-gallon bucket that can be contributed all at once to a compost pile. So that's a good way to manage small amounts of kitchen scraps for people who live alone, or just a couple, or even a family of 4 may not produce that many kitchen scraps.
So we have probably a gallon compost container. Could I just empty the gallon outside, and I guess it's cold enough at this point, and wait till I get 5 gallons and put it in the compost?
Well, if it stays frozen, that's fine. The problem is if you're just dumping it out like every few days, it's going through the decomposition process. And so you are losing the benefit of starting your compost all at once, so that you get maximum efficiency of those, of your 10, 30, 60 components of your high nitrogen greens and browns. Did that make sense? Sometimes this can get complicated. But
well, it does. But like you said already, when it's just 2 people, it's hard to get enough. Maybe we could do a neighborhood pickup.
Yeah, there you go. You could become the trash man. That'd be awesome. Okay, we have Jack, Clint, and 2 different people on here. Probably 2 members of the same family. Melora, do you guys have questions? You certainly don't have to, but if you do,
hello, William.
Please share. Clint, go ahead.
Hey, man. So I've been, I'm behind schedule and, and all that, but I've been fabricating this greenhouse in my head, and this is probably something that I'll get going on and hopefully get something up and running next year. Where I'm in the southern part of Utah, and it's really hot, and you're kind of familiar with the climate. What would your opinion be on a green plastic versus a white plastic?
The green ones, they don't let as much light in for your winter time when you need more light, but they give you shade in the summer when it gets super hot. So
Right.
That's what you're dealing with. What I would do is I would do just a white plastic or a clear translucent plastic, and then make sure that your vent, like your end walls and your side walls, can roll up really big so that you can vent it completely out. The number one problem people make with greenhouses is the venting is not big enough so that it can be cooled off in the summertime. I mean, where you are, you have normal temperatures above 100 degrees every day for like 2 months, so it can be super, super hot there. And in a greenhouse, it's easy to get 20 degrees hotter than it is outside. So on your 110 degree days, everything in that greenhouse will be dead, unless you have sufficient ventilation. So your green plastic may help you, but if you're focusing on a really good harvest throughout the winter time, then I would go with the white plastic and make sure that your venting is really good for the summer.
Okay.
And there's one more thing about that is super important. If you get online, you can find out calculators for everything. You can type in calculator to convert metric to standard and all that stuff. Well, they have calculators to calculate how to vent a greenhouse and how big of a fan to put in it so that you can like be able to keep that greenhouse at the same temperature, or maybe only 5 or 10 degrees hotter than it is outside. Okay, so those calculators exist.
Okay.
But now listen to me. None of those that I have ever used were correct. They all calculate it way too small. I used a calculator on that on like 4 or 5 greenhouses. And so the last greenhouse that I built, I mean, not the one I have now because I don't even have fans in it, but the last one that I built that did have fans in it, I doubled the amount of fans and it still wasn't enough.
Oh, wow.
So some engineer somewhere went through the math, and I'm not being mean to engineers here. It's just that there was something missing in the real world and the calculations that should have been correct. So, so be careful with that. And I wouldn't even put fans in a greenhouse. First of all, it makes your you have to buy the fan. That's expensive. A lot of times you're buying shutters or something for the other side. Those are expensive. You're having to pay more in electricity. That's expensive. And then you get really frustrated in the summertime because it's running 18 hours a day trying to cool it off. And so your electric bill gets really high. So that can be a problem. So the greenhouses that I help people do now, and I tell them what to do, just have great big giant roll up walls on like at least your 2 longest sides. So the length, not so much the width. And a lot of times people say, okay, so I'm going to have a 2-foot sidewall that rolls up. No. You have a 6-foot sidewall that rolls up. In other words, it rolls up 6 feet high. So, and that will vent it pretty good, usually. So, anyway, that I'm going to stop screaming about that right now. Okay. Anybody else have questions?
Thank you.
You bet, Clint.
I have one more quick question.
Okay.
So my wife is a politician, nutritionist person on like health boards and whatnot. And she is very curious as to what kind of policies in local government you think are the most helpful or the most harmful to, encouraging farming and the food production on the local level, even if it's not commercial.
So your local health department is usually the government agency that deals with food. And I have super good friends in different places of the country whose farms have been shut down. And we're just talking about somebody with a backyard garden, and they were selling to 20 people. And their farms have been shut down by the health department. The health department does not have jurisdiction in any of the 50 states, as far as I know. I haven't checked the laws for about 8 years since I lived in Oregon. So I don't even know how long that was, but it's been a while. So at that time, they did not have the jurisdiction to shut down what you were doing, but they did think they do. They think they can shut you down because they can go into a restaurant and shut them down. That's the purpose of the health department. If a restaurant is serving food that is not fit for human consumption, meaning somebody could get sick from it, then they will shut them down. They have the power to do that. And so if a farm is doing something, producing food, then they can come in and try to shut people down. This happened to Laura and Monty Bledsoe in Overton, Nevada. It's happened to people all over the United States, and it's crazy. But that's what the sheriff is for. The purpose of the county sheriff, and it's funny because there was a guy who interviewed sheriffs, and the sheriffs didn't know this. They didn't know their constitutional purpose. They just thought they were another part of the law enforcement of the police force. But the purpose constitutionally of the county sheriff is to protect the people from the government. So that's what the county sheriff is for. So if a government agency comes to an individual, then who do we call to protect us from a policeman or from any government agency? We call the sheriff, and that's the sheriff's job. So if the federal government comes in, that's their job. And it's funny because in today's world, people don't know that. You don't call the police if a government agency comes to you, because the police force, they don't have that constitutional authority and right. And we don't vote for the police force. We vote for the county sheriff. And that's why the people elect the sheriff, is because the sheriff represents the person, the voter. And yet we don't vote for like a police chief, or we don't vote for the FBI. Those people are appointed. So I don't know if that answered that one part of your question, but the part of your question was, what is the problem or government agencies that have caused problems? The health department. For some reason, they think that they have jurisdiction over food, and they do, and they have exercised their authority too much in certain instances, and they have caused problems. So when it happened to Laura and Monty, they called the who were they? They're called the Farm to Food Legal Defense Fund. That's who they are. So they called them. They just had the number on the refrigerator, just on a little magnet. And after this was happening, because their whole farm was being raided by the health department, she called the police. Police came, and they were so confused. What? These people aren't criminals. They like are prominent members of our community. What are you talking about? And the health department lady's jumping up and down and screaming and saying, they are trying to feed people this food. It was vegetables from their garden. Oh, it's so absurd. It's hilarious. And so, but this went on for a while, like 20 minutes. I finally thought, oh yeah, I have that number. I'm going to go call it. So he went and called it, and he said, go. And the lawyer from the Legal Defense Fund, he said, well, call your sheriff and have him come out, because that's his job. And so they called him, and I don't know. They said they have absolutely no rights. Tell them to leave. Did you own your farm? They're like, yeah, we own the farm. So then tell them to leave. They're trespassing. They can't come on your farm. So anyway, it's crazy. Yeah, there's videos of Laura talking about that. She became what do you call it when you go a lobbyist? She became a lobbyist in the state of Nevada and spent a year or two when the legislature was in Carson City, and she was up there talking about this whole thing and how absurd it was, which was interesting. Yeah, I love politics. It's great. So who is the most helpful? That was the other part. Who is the most helpful? I've got that one. That's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer. Who is the most helpful?
Or beyond what policies do you think have been the most helpful? Like if you were going to take a stance on something as a health department person.
I don't know. I'm almost 50 years old. I've been involved in this my entire life. I was selling at farmers markets as a kid, and there's no government agency that's ever been helpful. We've always been fighting them, which should tell you something. It's always been a fight. In the state of Oregon, we went down there to the Capitol, and they had anyway, there was a stupid law up there, and this is not answering your question, but it's kind of along these lines. But they had this law that you could not process a chicken in your backyard and then and eat it. It was against the law because it could be unsafe to butcher your own chicken. And so you had to take your chickens to a federal inspected plant to have it to butcher a chicken, okay, like your own chicken. So that's how corrupt the laws were in Oregon. Oregon, New York, and California have the worst laws as far as this stuff goes. So we're running a farm in Oregon, and we had, the rest of all the other states, all 49 states said, if you have less than 1,000 chickens that you're butchering, it's fine. You're just a backyard, whatever, no big deal. If you're butchering more than 1,000 chickens, then you probably need to, you're going to be so big, there could be problems. The chicken could be sitting out too long and cause salmonella poisoning. We need to have a professional to help people. And so that's why they do this. So we went and lobbied at the state, and, we were there. We just went down. It was like one day we were there to testify, and my wife did. She testified. And all we wanted to do was to change the law in Oregon so that all of these people who were butchering chickens in the backyard were no longer committing a felony. It was actually a felony, which is insane. It wasn't even a misdemeanor. So let's just make it in the law in the state of Oregon the way all the other states are, so that all these people are not committing felonies. I mean, nobody was prosecuted ever, but I mean, I'm running a farm, and I was raising like 900 birds a year and selling them, and we butchered them on farm because it's the best way to do it. You have the healthiest, the best quality. You have the lowest risk of the problems that these things are trying to solve. And so we're raising chickens, we're butchering them, we're felons, and so we don't want to be felons. So we changed the law. Then a couple of months, and the law was changed. But then, a few years later, we left. So me and a group of like 20 other farmers got together, and we did this. And so the American system still works. We still can create laws to help us do things that help the community. The interesting thing is most people don't get involved in government. We just tend to hate government. And then we are subject to whatever somebody else's law makes. See, I lived in Oregon for 5 years. I think it was 5 years. And in those 5 years, I was influential in changing a law that now millions of people in Oregon are dealing with. So does that make me a bad guy? Not really. I just took advantage of the system. I was part of the government because it's we, the people. It's not the king is in charge. That is why we have this government. So, I mean, in a roundabout way, I think that kind of answers your question. What government thing is out there that can help you? It's called the Constitution of the United States. Open your mouth, talk to people, talk to your representatives, talk to your congressman. Most of the work that can be done that really enhances life, like quality of life for people, is done on the local level, in your county, in your state. And you're living in Utah. You have the Red Acre Center located there in Cedar City. They're fantastic because they Sabrina goes up there and she just rents an apartment the entire time that Congress is in session. Is that what it's called at the state level? But anyway, when they're in session in the winter, she's there the whole time, and she's at the state capitol every single day that they are in session, talking to all of the people to make it really great for farmers to be able to get food from their garden and from their barnyard into the mouths of the people. And they've done a fantastic job over I don't know how long she's been doing it. I think it's more than a decade now. It's been great. And if that doesn't exist in your state, then become that person, you know, or at least support it and get people who are doing that. And I know that's what you're doing, Aubrey, and that's what you're talking about, you know, because you are involved with the local government. So that's fantastic. And we need nutritionists who care about good food and who can work with the local governments so that people can get good food, because we are having a major famine of quality food. It is extremely hard for people to find really good quality food because the grocery stores just don't really have it. I mean, you can find good food there, but it's not the quality that it should be. All right. Any more questions? I'm going to take one more question and then I'm done because I need a drink of water. We covered politics tonight. We covered nutrition. We covered compost. We covered pruning fruit trees. We covered my book. One of these days, I'm going to say my book is ready to buy and everybody can order it. And then we'll see what happens after that. Then you'll have all kinds of questions.
No, but you have to autograph it. So we have to make sure we get you to autograph it for us.
But that's right. You guys are coming out here and bring your soil sample.
Yes.
Yes.
Wait,
Yeah.
wait a few weeks, and then we can do that while you're here.
All
It
right.
might be I don't know. Yeah, it might be towards the 1st of April when I have it ready. So
Okay.
You know, that's about the right timing for us too. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll see what happens.
All
Because
right.
I don't know, because you know, there's having the publication done and I get everything, because I got to get these blurbs in it. The book's done, it's finished, it's over, it's there. I'm just waiting to get a hard copy back so that I can go through every page, make sure that everything actually printed out the way I wanted it, because you can't trust computers. And then once I do that, so that'll take me one day to go through the book and make sure it's perfect. And then we're going to upload anything that needs to be corrected. We'll do that, and we'll upload the blurbs at the same time, and then it's ready. So I don't know how long that process will take. But I have most of my blurbs back. So anyway, and then when we order them, then they got to be printed, and that takes a couple of weeks. Might be the end of April by the time, but whatever. But we're trying to hurry. All right, thanks for being on. Hopefully this was helpful for you.
Yes, thank
And
you.
have a fantastic night. When we'll be back next week, same time, same place.
You too. Thanks.
Great.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, William.
You're welcome, everyone.
Mhm.
Mhm.